Well, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's definitely true when it comes to wrapping our minds around concepts that are challenging to master. And Hebrew parallelism is one of those concepts. We simply don't write that way or speak that way in modern English and probably most other modern languages. So it's a way of framing poetry that's a little bit foreign to what we are familiar with. And so, in the mindset that a picture is worth 1,000 words, we're going to work through Psalm 96, focusing on how the parallelism is built and constructed and what it's communicating. And my hope and prayer is that as you see it in action, the penny's going to start to drop in your mind and you'll start to say, ah, that's how it works. So let's dive into Psalm 96. Now, before we dive into the details of any psalm, we always want to try and understand the big picture of the psalm. Put differently, we want to understand the controlling theme. So every psalm has a sense of unity that runs through it. It has some idea or emotion or concept that binds the whole thing together and gives it unity. And we need to wrap our minds around that big picture so that we don't distort the individual parts. So even though we're looking at parallelism, let's begin by wrapping our minds around the big picture of Psalm 96. The statement of the controlling theme. Now, you often find this at the early part of a psalm, but sometimes you want to read the whole psalm to get the total picture. What is the unifying idea of Psalm 96? It is that Yahweh is king and he deserves worship not only from Israel, but from all nations. So it's one of the so called kingship of Yahweh Psalms that celebrates God's kingship over the whole world and calls upon all people everywhere to worship Yahweh alone. How does it develop that controlling theme? This is a subspecies of a praise psalm, and praise psalms almost always develop their controlling theme by listing the praiseworthy qualities of God. But they often also alternate between calling for praise and then cataloging the reasons why God is worthy of that praise. And we find that alternating rhythm of call, catalog, call, catalog, call permeating Psalm 96. So it's developed by means of a catalog or list of reasons to praise. And it resolves its controlling theme by leading to this crescendo at the end, where it's not only the nations and the peoples, but creation itself that rejoices in Yahweh's kingship, showing that his reign over all the world is something that is good, good for everyone, even good for inanimate creation. Psalm 96, therefore, a kingship of Yahweh psalm, celebrating that Yahweh reigns over all the earth and everyone should worship him, developed by a catalogue and culminating in a crescendo of praise where all creation rejoices in the fact that God's reign is something really good. Against that background, we are ready to dive into the strophes of Psalm 96 and see how the author uses Hebrew parallelism to communicate this rising crescendo of praise. What we are going to look for is the pattern of relationships between the various lines and phrases of the poem. So he starts, sing to the Lord. Let's call that opening phrase our A idea. A new song. So our very first poetic phrase is sing to the Lord a new song. And then he repeats, sing to the Lord. So we repeat A, all the earth. That's a different idea, right? Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. So there's overlap, but there's also difference between those two phrases of the poem, those two lines of text. He continues with sing to the Lord, praise his name. So a third new idea. And then we have proclaim his salvation. This is echoing praise his name. So I'm going to label it D. Proclaim his salvation day after day. So we have this beautiful rhythm. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name. Proclaim his salvation day after day. Now, this is a kind of parallelism known as staircase parallelism. Can you see why? It's like you're building a staircase. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name. Declare his salvation day after day. So you're building this rising staircase. And often staircase parallelism will have exactly what we got here. We've got A, and then the last phrase in the set breaks away from the pattern. And what this does is it serves to emphasize the final phrase. Proclaim his salvation day after day. So yes, we must sing to him. It must be all the earth. We must praise his name. But he's building to a climax, and that climax is calling on everyone to declare or proclaim his salvation day after day. Isn't that a beautiful thought that our evangelism, our declaring the salvation of God, is the climactic act of praise envisaged here? Proclaim his salvation day after day. So we've got this building between the lines. And notice that while the lines are saying similar things, they're not saying identical things. So we've got developing ideas from a new song, which is what you praise with, to all the earth. This is who should praise. To praise his name, this is whom you praise. And then proclaiming his salvation is the focus of the what. So we've got, even though there's repetition, there's also development of ideas. The subsequent lines are always adding something extra to the preceding ones. Then we come to verse 3 and we have declare his glory. This is very similar to what we had praise his name. In fact, this and this are somewhat parallel. Proclaim his salvation, declare his glory among the nations, we'll call it F. And now the word declare is assumed here, but not repeated. That's very common. It's what we call incomplete parallelism because the verb is not repeated. So the verb from the first line, which is the declare, is assumed to apply to both halves. Declare his glory among the nations, implicit declare his marvelous deeds, so that's still a D idea, among all peoples. And so these two lines are very closely parallel. We've got two things. What are you declaring? His glory and his deeds among the nations, among all peoples. And there's still escalation from the first line here to the second one. Notice declaring his glory is related but not identical to specifically the glorious things that he has done. One focuses on character, but then we introduce how that character manifests in God's actions towards his people. And then we escalate from among the nations by the addition of all. So declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds to all peoples. And the all intensifies the thought, doesn't it? It broadens the scope of the praise. This last verse would be a classic example of synonymous parallelism. This is where two lines basically echo each other. They're saying something similar in words that are synonyms. Let's move on to verses 4 to 6 and continue to note how the parallelism is working. Verse 4 says, for great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. Let's say we call that A. Great is the Lord and most worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. Let's call this idea C. Now, what you will notice in verse 4 is that the second line, technically the second poetic phrase, the one he is to be feared above all gods, doesn't actually echo or repeat the wording or the grammar of the first line. So this one is not a restatement or repeat of the preceding line. That is what we refer to as synthetic parallelism. It's not where the word comes from, but you can think of something that's synthetic is a little bit false. It's not really parallelism because the two poetic lines or phrases are not actually echoing each other. The second one is just adding a thought that builds and completes the first one. So we've got Yahweh is great. He's worthy of praise. He is to be feared above all gods. Now, you might notice here that you could argue differently. We could say, well, actually, he's to be feared above all gods is quite a similar thought as he is most worthy of praise. And if we thought this second half was a B phrase, then it would change from being synthetic to being synonymous. Parallelism. And the idea would be Yahweh is great, he is worthy of praise. Yahweh is great, he is to be feared above all gods. So sometimes it's not clear whether the second phrase is partially, not completely, but partially parallel. This one, you can make this argument both ways. Verse 5, for all the gods of the nations are idols. Now, when you've got parallelism and you see the word but, you can be pretty sure that you are looking at antithetical or antithetic parallelism. Antithetic parallelism means that the first line and the second line, more correctly phrase, the first phrase and the second phrase are making the same point, but they're doing it by stating opposites. It's not green, but it is blue. They're making the same, sharing one idea, one basic idea, but by stating both the positive and the negative side of it. And the word but has to start the second or contrasting phrase. Very common in Proverbs, not so common in the Psalms. So what's the idea here? So we've got all the gods of the nations. That's our A idea. And then we've got our idols. We'll call that our B idea, right? But the Lord, that's our A idea. So the Lord stands in contrast to the gods of the nations. They are idols, but he made the heavens. So they are idols, and the picture of the idol is that it is static. It does nothing. It creates nothing. It goes nowhere, says nothing. It is mute and lame and useless. So the contrast is the gods of the nations can do nothing, but Yahweh made the heavens. He made the starry hosts and the millions and millions of stars. He is all powerful. And if we refer back to this context here, the Lord is great, he is worthy of praise, and he is demanding of fear. And that's driven home in the second phrase. The gods of the nations, they don't deserve praise and they don't deserve fear because they are idols. They do nothing, they say nothing. But Yahweh, he does everything. He made the heavens. We come to verse 6. And we have splendor and majesty are before him. So we've got an A component here. Splendor and majesty are before him. Strength and honor, this matches splendor and majesty, are his sanctuary. So this is classic synonymous parallelism, where the two poetic phrases really echo each other closely. And this is what we would call complete parallelism because there are matching elements in both lines. So no part is left implicit where you've got to supply it from the preceding phrase. Also notice this basic idea that we have in the first part is added to. The second part isn't just saying the same thing. In other words, it's saying something really similar, but it's in some sense broadening or intensifying the idea. So splendor and majesty are before him in his heavenly throne, but strength and glory are in his sanctuary as he is with his people, accessible to them. And here in verse 7 and 8, we have another example of, do you remember the name of this kind of parallelism? It's staircase parallelism, because it's building like a staircase. Let's see how he puts it together. We've got ascribe to the Lord, all you families of the earth. That's AB. And then we've got the A repeated. Ascribe to the Lord glory and strength. And then we have ascribe to the Lord the glory due his name. We could say this is C again, because there's a close parallel between the ascribing of glory. But notice that when two ideas are parallel, even synonymously parallel like these two, you still have a basic idea here and then some kind of expansion or development. So it's glory and strength. It's the glory due his name. It's very similar thought, but there's some kind of expansion in the second part. And then we break away from the staircase with bring an offering, and we could label this E, come into his courts. And remember the final phrase that breaks the pattern, it breaks the flow of the staircase, tends to be where a lot of the emphasis lies. So we've got this sense of ascribe to the Lord all families of the nations, ascribe glory and strength, ascribe the glory due to his name. Specifically do this by bringing an offering and coming into his courts. Come and worship Yahweh in his temple where he has made his presence known. On to verses 9 and 10. Worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. Let's continue labeling. So we got A, worship the Lord in the splendor of his holiness. So we got two ideas there. Line would go here if we wanted to split them. Tremble before him is parallel to worship the Lord, all the earth. So what we've got here is A, B, A, C. And this is an example of synonymous parallelism, where the second phrase both echoes and repeats the idea of the first one, but also it introduces some kind of additional development. It's saying more than just repeating the first line. So worship the Lord. This is a how clause, right? In the splendor of holiness, tremble before him. And our second, what's the variation? What's the plus factor? It's a who clause, all the earth. So you can see the expansion in the second part. Verse 10, say among the nations, the Lord reigns. So say among the nations, the Lord reigns. The world is firmly established. Now, is this phrase, the world is firm, is it echoing anything in the previous phrase? No. So let's label it a C. It cannot be moved. Well, it's really also C, right? It's firmly established. It cannot be moved. So we'll call those both C. Neither of these thoughts in this line are echoing the first phrase. So the relationship between 10a and 10b is synthetic parallelism. The second line isn't echoing or repeating using synonyms or antonyms anything in the first. And then we add C. He will judge the peoples with equity. This, again, doesn't echo what's in the previous phrase. Notice, by the way, that this is a tricolon, meaning it's a line of poetry. Verse 10, it's a line of poetry with three poetic phrases. Most Hebrew poetry has two phrases to each line, but quite often you'll find tricolor or lines with three phrases like this one. So this would be synthetic parallelism because the second and third phrases of our tricolon are not repeating or echoing. They are simply completing the thought by adding new ideas that don't echo what's in the previous one. So that by definition is synthetic parallelism. And finally, verses 11 to 13. We could segment verse 13 off. It is related thematically, so we're going to treat them together, but we could segment it out. We've got let the heavens rejoice. That's our A idea. Let the earth be glad. I'm going to call it B. It's really another version of A. Let the sea resound. So heavens and sea and earth. That's pretty much all creation. Let's go with A. Let the sea resound and all that is in it. We'll call that C. So we've got synonymous parallelism here, right? Synonymous parallelism. And it continues into the next line. Let the fields be jubilant. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. So what he does here essentially is he combines the A, B of the previous phrase into one thing. So you can't segment them out so neatly, but it's the same idea. Let the fields be jubilant and everything in them. Let all the trees of the forest sing for joy. So we've got jubilant and sing for joy, and we've got fields and trees, and we've got everything and all. So you can see this matching rhythm throughout. So both of these would be synonymous parallelism. Now, verse 13 is really interesting because at some level it continues to echo the ideas of verses 11 and 12, but its parallelism diverges from them. So we've got let all creation rejoice before the Lord. We're going to call that A. For he comes, let's label that our B idea, right? Now notice what he's going to do. He's going to echo this. He's going to say he comes. So A, he comes. B, to judge the earth. That's C. He will judge, that's C, in righteousness. We'll call that D. So he will judge the world in righteousness. The peoples, that's still D, in his faithfulness. That's, let's call it E, but it corresponds to in righteousness. So this could be D or E. So you've got A, B, B, C, C, D, D, maybe E, maybe an echo D. What is this? It's another version of our staircase parallelism, where you've got this progressive escalation. Each new idea is building on the one that went before. Let all creation rejoice before him. A, he comes. B, he comes. B, to judge. C, he comes. He will judge. C, restated in righteousness, etc. So you see this evolution of ideas. And notice that throughout this, each new element is not just repeating, it's adding, it's building, it's enriching the picture. So when we're interpreting the psalm, we want to understand the escalation of the thought. We misread parallelism if we think that the second half, which sounds really similar to the first, is just a boring repetition of it. It is an echo, but it's intended to drive home that, yeah, that's true. And wait, there's more. Hopefully not like a cheap infomercial. There's more in a way that is wonderful and rich in the poetry. Well, they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And that's definitely true when it comes to wrapping our minds around concepts that are challenging to master. And Hebrew parallelism is one of those concepts. We simply don't write that way or speak that way in modern English and probably most other modern languages. So it's a way of framing poetry that's a little bit foreign to what we are familiar with. And so, in the mindset that a picture is worth 1,000 words, we're going to work through Psalm 96, focusing on how the parallelism is built and constructed and what it's communicating. And my hope and prayer is that as you see it in action, the penny's going to start to drop in your mind and you'll start to say, ah, that's how it works. So let's dive into Psalm 96.